What's going on, guys? I'm Roger Fountain, and today we're going to be talking about Asteroid City, Wes Anderson's latest flick. Thanks to American Cinematheque, we got to see an early screening of it on the 14th. I think it comes out. It came out on the 16th, so it's kind of in competition this weekend with DC's The Flash movie, Warner Brothers' The Flash movie. But yeah, I'm not the world's biggest Wes Anderson fan, to be sure. Like I said previously, I find his use of symmetry and stuff a little gimmicky, but I will say initial thoughts on Asteroid City. It's less so because, like, in the past, predominantly his films have been like shot using 4x3 or not American widescreen standard, or he just uses like old aspect ratios, like for it was Grand Budapest Hotel and whatever. So, but he changes it up. His first movie, what was it? It's not Bottle Rocket something. I know I'm terrible. But in that one, it was just shot. I think it's CinemaScope or widescreen at least. And so that's what I like about this new one is it's kind of like a hybrid. So half of it is in CinemaScope, which is like the colorized stuff that you see, and then the whenever it cuts away to, so Asteroid City is like a play. This is a very like meta, self-aware movie. Because Wes Anderson, he did a pre-recorded Q&A, and he talks about this afterwards. He basically had like two ideas. He wanted to make a movie for Jason Schwartzman as the lead. And so half of the movie is the play, and there's some crossover of it's like actors playing their roles, and it cuts to black and white 4x3 shots of behind the scenes in New York or whatever of them putting on the play Asteroid City, of the actors putting on the play Asteroid City. And it's got a Wes Anderson-esque character played by Edward Norton. And Bryan Cranston plays kind of a Rod Serling type. Sterling type. Who's like, it's black and white, so he talks through it like it's like the Twilight Zone almost. And he like, so spoiler alert, if you care about spoilers in a Wes Anderson movie, you should probably stop watching now. If you're a Wes head, as they self-identify, if you're a Wes Anderson fan, just go. I know you're gonna go watch it. So, but yeah, so Bryan Cranston plays like a Rod Serling type, and he's like the narrator and stuff, and he stumbles on to the play's set for a little bit, and is very self-aware. He's like, am I supposed to be here? Is this right? But yeah, so last year, I think it was last year or the year before it, he came out with The French Dispatch. And so The French Dispatch followed this kind of Citizen Kane-esque character who ran a newspaper, and all of his like writers and editors underneath him all had their separate storylines. If you haven't seen that, then I guess spoilers for that too, but you probably should have seen it by now. But it was a lot to keep up with, as far as like there was a character who had a photographic memory of whatever text he had written before, and they're interviewing him. In the middle of the interview, they like stop and ask him another question, and then like 15 or 10 minutes go by, and then they ask him to pick back up where he left off, and boom, he does it, like completely photographic memory. And it's the guy that plays sorry, he's in the Batman. He plays Gordon in the Batman, the new Commissioner Gordon. And he's back in this in a similar capacity, but he plays like a government official or something. Obviously, this is all of Wes Anderson movies are like huge ensemble pieces, right? This is one of the few, maybe the only one that he's done that doesn't have Bill Murray in it. I guess Bill Murray was sick, is what he said. So Bill Murray had like COVID or something, I'm assuming. And so Steve Carell takes his character's spot. But Wes Anderson likes to work with like the same people over and over again. Obviously, Jason Schwartzman is in like his first movie, and everything after that, pretty much. And usually he has the guy that he went to school with, Owen Wilson, in it. He is not featured in this film, but it's still good. So some of his stuff, frankly, I think relies too heavily on his gimmicks. If you've seen the SNL sketch of Edward Norton making fun of, it was, what if Wes Anderson directed a horror movie and like the killer throws like a note through the window, and then you have that over the top shot of the text, and it's all very symmetrical, and it's like, hey, do you mind if we invade your house? Signed, The Killer. Shit like that, and it's old like typewriter font, and then he like signs it back. He's like, no. He's like, don't come in or whatever, and sends it back. It's pretty spot on, but I think this one relies less heavily on his gimmicks, which I appreciate, as not a huge Wes Anderson fan. I'd say my favorite Wes Anderson film, which I haven't seen. What haven't I seen? I haven't seen Rushmore. I know. Give me shit now. I haven't seen Rushmore or Moonrise Kingdom. Yeah, go ahead. Eviscerate me for that. Moonrise Kingdom, I know, was like the biggie, focused on like young love or whatever, like this camp and shit. And I think it took home a couple of Academy Awards for screenplay and something else, maybe. Maybe I'm wrong. But I haven't seen that. But I'd say my favorite, I've seen The Royal Tenenbaums and whatever his first one was called, and The Life Aquatic. So I'm familiar a little bit with his stuff. Again, I just find it kind of annoying. But anyways, I'm talking about this in the context of his other work. I think this plot line is more simplified, which I appreciate, because at some point, like all the characters just become too difficult to keep up with their motivations and stuff, and like what happens, yada yada. And this is probably, I was bored with the Royal Tenenbaums. Like, it took until like 2 hours in, whenever Ben Stiller's character, spoilers for this, whenever Ben Stiller's character like attempts suicide or whatever, that's the only thing that like brought me back in. And I was talking with a friend of mine, and she's a fan of Wes Anderson stuff, not a super fan or by any stretch of the imagination, but she's just like, I couldn't tell you what any of the plots of the movie are. And I'm like, yeah, they're not really plot focused, they're more character focused, which is fine. It's just not my thing, because I prefer, shit to actually happen in my movie for it to be entertaining. And so his movies are always just kind of like, oh, characters running around and doing this and talking about this and whatever, yada, yada, yada. They have quirky interests and quirky whatever. So, I mean, Asteroid City's kind of like that. But the climax that it builds up to is, so Jeff Goldblum is in this. very briefly. And he's done stop motion stuff before. He always does like stop motion animation. He said the biggest stop motion animation puppet that they had was for The Life Aquatic, for the huge shark, who was apparently like so big, was the largest stop motion puppet ever created apparently. And so there's like a 3 foot tall stop motion puppet in this for Jeff Goldblum's character, who's the alien that comes down into Asteroid City. So Asteroid City, I liked a lot because I'm familiar with, I like the whole like retro, he does a lot of retro stuff, but this is specifically like Roswell area, whatever, 41, 52, 42, whatever it is, out in the desert, right? And surrounding like government conspiracies and paranoia and stuff, and it's this small town built up around this asteroid that fell however many years ago. And so they have a military base there just for like study and whatever. But in the meantime, they also have it as a tourist attraction, which is like in this like glass case and stuff, whatever, this little cage for people to come in. And so the story centers around Jason Schwartzman's character, Augie. He arrives there with his family. I think it's 3 girls and a boy. And it's a timepiece. And so he gets into like... his wife died, the kid's mom died like a couple of weeks earlier, but he doesn't tell them at all. Like they go on this like cross-country road trip from wherever. I think it's like New York to California or whatever. Then they stop at this city just because their car's like having problems or whatever. And he's kind of forced to tell them that she passed away. And his son is like, this is like a stop on their trip because he's up for like some whatever scholarship. Stargazer scholarship. And so he finally tells them, and the kid's the boy's the oldest of his kids, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I already knew. But as he talked about, it's just getting into that time period of you kind of deny that anything bad has happened. It's after the Great Depression. It's like after World War II, I think, pre-Vietnam War, obviously. But it's just like, he doesn't want to deal with his kids dealing with the fact that their mom's gone. And he has her ashes in this, like, Tupperware thing. And it's pretty comedic. It's pretty comedic in relation to his other work. I feel like all of his work is pretty, like, quirky and can be funny at times. But I think this one leans the most heavily on comedy for entertainment, which... I appreciate because I get bored by his other stuff, obviously. There's like a little stop-motion Roadrunner. He might be CG Roadrunner. That's like throughout the film. And the crowd that I saw it with, we went to the Aero Theater in Santa Monica, and they were all pretty big Wes Anderson fans, so literally he can do no wrong. And so they were just laughing at the most random shit, and I'm just like, that's not funny. Why are you laughing? This isn't even a joke. This is just like a thing. Again, he sticks with his symmetry, but the symmetry in CinemaScope in full color affects me less. It pisses me off less, but all the and I like the cut twos, the black and white stuff of Bryan Cranston being the narrator and going to the stage and stuff. But anyways, so Jeff Goldblum's character, when he first appears, the alien, he comes down to get the meteorite, and it's stop motion animation, and he just like grabs it. And the main character, Jason Schwartzman's character, Augie, is also a photographer, and so he takes like a picture of the alien, and the alien like holds up the like meteorite to like pose with it before he like leaves or whatever. And so all you get from Jeff Goldblum's performance is, I don't think they did like motion capture or anything for reference. They just tried to make him move and be like awkward. His like body style is like larger at the top, thin legs, pretty tall, just like Jeff Goldblum, like lanky, awkward. And so he takes the picture and then he like leaves, whatever, and takes the rock with him. And so he gets into... Everybody in this town goes into quarantine, and so they can't leave. And so Tom Hanks plays Augie's father, who's there just to pick up the kids and take them all the rest of the way to California. He lives on like a fucking golf course or something. He's got a shit ton of money. And it's his daughter that died. They don't really address that emotionally. Everybody in this, which is funny just because of like, if you think in the context of America, of the world's greatest generation, they don't really... think about stuff emotionally. They don't address it. His daughter died and he fucking hardly says anything about it. Like, he's just like, oh yeah. He only harps on how much he dislikes the guy that his daughter married. And but he's just like, I'm here, I'm stuck here, whatever, and he like just has to deal with him. So it gets into like the pandemic stuff. I don't know if they shot this over the pandemic. Maybe they did, but it kind of weaves its way into the script because everybody in the town again goes into quarantine, and then they do it again. They go into quarantine again after the alien comes back and drops the rock back off after it's been like signed in some sort of alien language, like whatever. It's just, I don't know. It's not very highfalutin. It's not as heady as this other stuff like the French Dispatch, which I appreciate. I'm more of a fan of his stop motion animation, to be honest. I think that's where his like skill set really shines as far as like script writing and stuff goes, because the Fantastic Mr. Fox with George Clooney and how they all like recorded, the Foley artists like recorded that, you know, if they're in a field, they recorded the bike in the field like actually, and like recorded his lines like over the top of it, you know, not very studio production value in that, just pretty much just like wherever the environment was, that's where they shot it. And I appreciate that. So I think Fantastic Mr. Fox is probably my favorite. I haven't seen Isle of Dogs, even though I need to. But yeah, I think that's where he shines. And so this is less heady, more comedic, and I think that works out very well for him. The climax, in quotes, is when after the alien like comes back, and they're just all the people that are trapped in this town try to break out of quarantine. So you got this random guy with like a jetpack. He's like, oh, how far can you get on that jetpack and whatever, and like all the characters in the frame are just doing a bunch of random shit like trying to escape. And one's got like a laser gun that was invented by his kid or whatever. And that only lasts for like 10 seconds. And it's nothing really ever comes of it. Because again, this was trying to be a Broadway play. And so in the midst of all that, the main character, Jason Schwartzman, literally just exits off the stage and goes out on the balcony in New York, whatever like theater they were like playing in. And he's like taking a smoke break or whatever. And Margot Robbie comes out on the opposite fire escape. And that's the real climax, because she's the actress that plays his wife, but he swaps his words. He's like, oh, you're the wife that played my actress. Which I'm like, it's just funny. And so, like, you know, it's just weird. All of his stuff is weird, but when you start getting into, like, you know, there's no real plot. It's a plot about a fictional play, and they don't really get into, like, the real lives of the actor. They get into the real lives of one of the producers, and the director, obviously played by Edward Norton. And so Willem Dafoe's like another producer or something. And one thing that they like chant at the end, they get all the actors on stage and stuff, and they make them act like they fall asleep. And so they like yell at the audience this line over and over again. They're like, you can't wake up if you don't fall asleep. They said that like over and over again. Scarlett Johansson's character and everything. I'm like, I don't understand what they're trying to say here. But it's very meta. I'd say it was more entertaining than some of his stuff because, like I said, in not Grand Budapest, but the French Dispatch and the Royal Tenenbaums. The Royal Tenenbaums, I like completely checked out. I was so bored with the characters that I just could hardly finish that movie. So at least this one kept my attention. One of the things that gets me is like, so it's about this like play, this Broadway play, which takes place in like the desert. And so these huge, instead of shooting it in the desert, because it's Wes Anderson and people will give him any amount of money that he fucking wants, like on The Life Aquatic, the huge submarine shot that he has like the crane pull out and show you this huge set, like it's like 2 football fields, like large, all these little rooms and compartments in the submarine that they're like shooting or whatever with Bill Murray, and he like walks up the ladder and stuff. So like just shit tons of money put into that. He built an entire small town, and he talked about importing all of the sand into this place. It's just this huge set that he built in Spain instead of just fucking building the flats and shooting in the desert, which I just think, I don't know, maybe it's just my sensibilities, but it's an exorbitant waste of money. Like, you could just put this shit in the desert. Like, you just build the flats and like the rocks. It's very Wile E. Coyote, early like Warner Brothers looking stuff. There's this continuous car chase of these police officers chasing this guy in this like old 60 model like hot rod with like, it's black with like flames on the side, and it's like this criminal kind of like Babyface Nelson type character sticking out of the window and like shooting back at the cops. Never gets resolved. It opens with that shit. He's like eating at a diner and leans out, like, again, he's the photographer, and like tries to get a picture of it. And they just fucking they're running away at the end too. So I don't know if they obviously bookended with that, and like you can see on the horizon line where the flats are. And so I think they have to like CG the car driving through that, because I'm like, how are these characters not smacking that shit? But I think the romantic angle between Jason Schwartzman's character and Scarlett Johansson's character was interesting. She plays an actress, and so she's rehearsing for some sort of play where she like overdoses and shit. And so they like talk about that a couple of times, and it's funny. It's funny when they break the fourth wall, because the director has a note, or the writer has a note for Jason Schwartzman's character. When he's not in the play, he's like, you know what? He's like, you got too much stuff going on, I think, frankly, because all the props that he's constantly using, he's like, you're smoking a pipe, you got the camera. He's like, you're doing too much, which I think was good. So I'd say, I don't know. Overall, this probably ranks. I need to watch Rushmore. Everybody tells me Rushmore is really good. But this is, as far as Wes Anderson stuff goes, it's one of my favorites just because it's entertaining, and I'd rather it be simple, because like if he starts getting into, and he doesn't use too many like gimmicky shots of, there's like a couple of shots of his notes like on the sides of like the kids' science projects and stuff, but he doesn't focus on that too much. He's basically just combining all of his ideas that he's worked with in the past, because Moonrise Kingdom was about like young love and like a young couple, and so he has that angle, and then he has like, you know, the deceased wife, the widower, and his romance with Scarlett Johansson's character, that angle, and then the older character, Tom Hanks's character. I did like all the kids in it are great. I think they're fantastic. They all did a great job, the young stargazers or whatever. And I loved the triplets, his like three daughters, who are they want to be witches, and so they just say that they're like witches, and like they're trying to like summon their mother back from the dead by like burying her ashes in the desert and shit, and like chanting and whatever. I'm like, that's cool. That's you know, it doesn't play up like a horror aspect or anything, but it's just good, you know. Obviously, his movies encourage like young people to like use their imaginations or whatever. There's a little bit of weird tension between Tom Hanks trying to get Jason Schwartzman's love interest, Scarlett Johansson, to get interested in him. It's like, you don't want that loser, you want me or whatever. Willem Dafoe briefly making an appearance. But yeah, and so there's like one shot of Jeff Goldblum in the black and white area in New York of him in the alien costume, which he obviously wasn't in before. It was just stop motion, but he says something about it or whatever. And so it just gets into like, I feel like everybody's thoughts about his movies are just like, what is this really about? Like, it's a bunch of nonsense and characters running about. Is there something deeper that I'm missing? And as far as Asteroid City goes, I'm like, no, I don't think you are. It's just a silly fun time. So I'm all for that. But yeah, if you get a chance, check it out. If you're a Wes Anderson fan, especially, you're gonna have a good. You know what you're in for. You're gonna have a good time. If you're not a Wes Anderson fan, you're gonna think, well, that was quirky, and that's what everybody fucking thinks, and that's probably all you should come away with. All right, guys, thanks for joining me.